thank you so much for your patience. And I also want to welcome you out to Mobile Monday. We're going to be talking about security today. The title, Protecting Your Privacy in a Not-So-Private World. And we have a great panel that's going to be with us today, and our moderator, Dennedy from McAfee, is here. And I think we got all you guys away from Dreamforce, so that's pretty great. So yeah, thank you to McAfee for helping us put this on. That's why all the nice cheeses were out there for you guys to enjoy. My name's Ryan Bloomer, and there's a bunch of people that help us out with Mobile Monday. And you know who you are. I could name off all the names, but there's so many out there. Thank you to bringing your Mac adapter as well. Mobile Monday, we've been around for, a very long time here in Silicon Valley, and all started in Helsinki, Finland. How many of you have been to a Mobile Monday, or how many of you have not been to a Mobile Monday before? It's crazy, every single time, it's like 50% of the people. So it's great that everyone's bringing their friends. I don't know how you guys are finding out about it, but I'm really glad that you guys are all here to enjoy the panel tonight. I'm not going to give it too much more than that. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce Dennedy to do her keynote. And then we're going to be doing the panel. So I hope you guys all enjoy. And afterwards, we'll have some more networking. There's more drinks to be had and food to be eaten. So Michelle, would you mind coming up here? Thank you so much. Let's give her a round of applause for Michelle Dennedy.
So much, Ryan, and I just want to couch expectations. It's less of a keynote and kind of almost a footnote. It's going to be a short. I want you guys to really meet our panelists tonight and have a good long chat about privacy and security. Sometimes the paradoxical decisions that we make, the way we code. Before we get started, I want to see a raise of hands. How many mobile developers do we have here? App developers, okay, handful. PCs. All right, see these gentlemen money later. Thank you guys for donating all that cash that you're getting about reporters, storytellers, moms, people who just wandered in for the cheese. Okay. Well, good. Well, thank you. See, at least we have one brave soul. That's been marked on your permanent record. I'm a privacy officer. I can do things like that. So, good morning, or good afternoon. This is going really well. I told you it was going to be more of a footnote, right? What I really wanted to do to set the stage, if you would, is to talk a little bit about my perceptions of privacy and to give you a little bit of background just to see where I'm coming from. I started life as a patent litigator. My very first case was an artificial penis. I kid you not. I'll tell you about that over drinks. There is such a thing, and there's not only a market, but there's a market that can be cannibalized. That's a legal term, I'm not joking. But I come from a world of tangible rights. And we'll stop talking about portable penises as we talk about tangible rights going forward. But my training was really in breaking down the bundle of rights that belong to a property owner. And while I think that talking about privacy in the context of ownership and complete ownership is a huge mistake because you run into a lot of problems with that mental model of management. I think it's instructive to think about how to look at this kaleidoscope of legal, contextual, social, and very much mobile requirements when it comes to data privacy, particularly in the mobile world. So I'll use another bad analogy of a trademark right. So I practiced a lot of trademark law in my career before I became a privacy officer. The kind of gestalt and the most important thing about a trademark is that it designates the origin of a good or service. And it starts from there. It emanates from the ownership of a category and a surrounding likelihood of confusion type of capture of category of goods and services. And it's mushy, and it's not clear, and it's not digital, and guess what? it works. On top of that platform, there are rights and obligations of the trademark owner. They have to police their rights, and that's a sunk cost, if you will, to make sure that the quality is consistent. The goal from a public policy perspective is protecting consumers from false players in the market, from uneven quality, etc. So you see where the analogy is starting to go. The privacy right emanates from a human being. So the origin of the goods and services, if you will, the cloud of data that we're putting out there, the cloud of data that we are lucky enough to be fiduciary owners of, if we are in this space, in this marketplace, really all come down to the human beings that emanate their information. Now they have rights and obligations as well. So as we give up our privacy going along, you have to consent, you have to understand context, etc. But the ownership and the fiduciary obligations, I think, you can see where the analogy says, as amorphous and mushy is the bundle of likelihood of confusion for innovation under a trademark right, you can imagine, if you will, the series of value that can be created around the bundle of rights emanating for information about something as capricious, interesting, and varied as a human being. And we can look at sister disciplines such as sociology and psychology and start to categorize those goods and services in a certain way. So I wanted to kind of put that out there to say privacy isn't just encryption, privacy isn't just seclusion, and privacy is certainly not dead. So I'll stop the keynote-ness of this, and I want to run through some quick stats here, both to stay employed and make my marketing team happy. So thank you guys for putting these together. So 1.6 million Americans fell victim to smartphone theft. These are only the reported theft. Lots of these devices go missing. What happens with the intellectual property rights of the missing device and the information that's held within? More than half the people have shared their mobile tablet or PIN with others. I think this statistic is incredibly low. How many people here have shared their password with their children or their spouse? All right, the rest of you are not being honest. There's more out there. Don't do it. I tell we do a lot of in-school training, think about your password, let me do your panties, make them exotic, and keep them to yourself. My parents are not leaving going, I don't want any part of this brand at all. Apps can be very risky, and the sad thing is I think some of it is innocent risk. We think that we are in such haste to create the next great Snapchat valued at $3 billion that we throw together an app that has certain functionalities and we forget that the information does indeed emanate from human beings. So I think there's a lot of progress to be made by better coding standards and practices, training people to have safer apps, and then showing people how to accept or not accept risky applications going along. Lots of people owning smartphones, but a lot of them, more than I care to say, including my kids, owning mobile devices. Amazing. They're as young as third grade, they're begging for an iPhone. I saw a kid with like an iPhone 5S in the third grade at school the other day. I was like, wow, I don't know what happened with that, but it's really interesting that it's become an entitlement and a kind of a passage of freedom as much as it is a device to call them. We don't have a lot of people protecting our devices at all. We're getting to be a very, very high percentage of people encrypting laptops and protecting their laptops and understanding that they need protected services, but very few consumers really thinking about protecting the mobile platform. So that's all I had. I wanted to make sure to have that as a background. And I don't know how to make a cooler background. You see Ryan like jumping, going. So if you can make me a pretty background, I will introduce the panel. So first we have, I'll start with Maggie Mobley, who's the Chief Privacy Officer for Carrier IQ. I won't do Price It Right and make you guys cheer like, oh, they're consultant for Frost & Sullivan in the Information and Communications Technologies Department and Consulting. Yeah, we're sitting on the other side. We have the wonderful Senior Bhalotra who paid my parking when I forgot my wallet. He also has a claim to fame as Cybersecurity Entrepreneur Chief Operating Officer for Impermium and former DC doyen of cyber. And not even probably, and I know a woman named Tiki Dare, the best name I've ever heard, Kashmir, who also happens to be really, really, really smart. She moderated my panel last year, so it's time to get back a little bit. She is the senior online editor for Forbes and really smart on these issues. So let's welcome her. Everybody says that they want their panels to be interactive, and we have a lot of questions, but I do want you guys to raise your hands. I'm only sort of one. There's some questions that I think are pets that I definitely do want to get through with these guys, because I know that they've got, but I really do want you guys to interact, okay? Who's going to do that? Thinking of questions? Yeah, okay, work with me. That's a quiz. You guys have all failed. Okay. We have a few. So the A students are in the back this time. You guys in the front. Questions, questions, questions. All right, so we'll get right into it. Let's start, just because I've got Kashmir's bio in front of me. Kashmir, you've done a lot of writing on privacy in the past, but just can you kick us off with some of these practical tips that you've put together? I thought that piece was particular genius.
And tips. And my microphone. Okay, so I have to like pull my head out of Bitcoin because I've been writing so much about Bitcoin. In the last
You can talk about Bitcoin.
There's a lot of privacy and security issues around Bitcoin. I wrote this post. It was, 10 really incredibly simple things to do to protect your privacy. And I think my first tip was actually to put a passcode on your phone, because so many people don't, including, I was surprised to find out, Marissa Mayer, the CEO of Yahoo, who said it was like too inconvenient to have to put in the passcode all the time. And so I found that a little surprising. That's one of the tips I give. But I find it's actually pretty hard to keep your passcode secret, especially in a new iOS 7 operating system. When you press the numbers, it glows, and so it's very, very obvious what passcode you're putting in. So for anybody who's sitting right next to you, like my boyfriend revealed very quickly that he knew my passcode because it's like lighting up right in front of him. Other things I advise are clearing cookies off of your computer regularly. What else did I put on there?
Don't make you go through all 10. I just thought a couple of those little things, and the little things make a big difference.
I think we talk a lot about like very complicated ways of protecting your privacy, but there are all these really, really easy ways, like not telling people what your password is, enabling privacy measures when you have the opportunity, turning on two-factor authentication. And I think the problem for a lot of people right now around privacy is this kind of convenience trade-off. And theoretically, I'd love to do these things, but I'm Marissa Mayer, and I need to be able to get into my phone really quickly. And so I'm just not putting my passcode on. Even though if I lost this phone, there's probably incredibly valuable information on there for somebody to get.
It's always proportionate, right? So the more you have to lose, the less time you have. And so it's an interesting balance for the security person. So I'm going to throw this out for anybody to pick up. The question is really, for you, what is the biggest privacy mobile issue that consumers should be concerned about? And what about the security side? And how does that balance out privacy versus security or security?
I'll throw one out there. I think on the privacy side, we love our apps, right? That's not the case. There's nothing about that. And every time you want to download one, of course, the little thing pops up. You might read it, you might not. But for most people, we just want our app. We just want to do whatever it is we need to do. So the permissions they ask for are all great. They tell you exactly what they're doing. You say yes or no. The problem with all that is really, at the end of the day, the vast majority of apps are collecting far more than they need. I remember being part of a big privacy conference, Michelle, I think you were in the room, where someone said the flashlight apps collects your location. And I mean, we had like, 150 people who were just privacy geniuses. We're all looking at each other trying to figure out why the flashlight app needs your location. So, not to pick on the flashlight apps, but there's so much information that is collected off of apps, and again, we're talking about mobility. So we want them, we do them, we don't even think twice about them, but to me, that's such a huge privacy, like, our phones are screaming at us, this is a privacy violation, and we're like, yes, please, give me more.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing. The coders in the room, I think it does come down to sloppy coding. I also can't see, unless it specifically says it's an ad-driven flashlight. I can't see the connection, and maybe someone can illuminate me on that.
Still haven't figured it out, that was over a year ago.
I have not figured out the
Work.
flashlight app. I have not had illumination on the flashlight. So anybody else would like to?
Yeah, let me jump in on security. So as Michelle mentioned, I spent 8 years in Washington working on cybersecurity. So one thing that we care a lot about was multi-factor authentication, and that's already too many people, not because of the privacy thing, but I think the usability thing, do not use multi-factor authentication. And it's very clear that that's the superior way to go. Passwords are not good enough to secure what you do on browsers, apps, phones. A few-digit PIN code on your phone can be brute forced. Short password to log on Amazon or Gmail is not going to be enough. So the government actually wrote a strategy that I helped with called Trusted Identity in Cyberspace Strategy, which is basically an alliance between the government and big companies to promote two-factor authentication.
So say that again slower, because you can Google that or Echo it if you're a security person.
Sure, it's NSTIC, National Strategy for Trusted Identities in Cyberspace, NSTIC. And it's a funded government program to help companies push out multi-factor authentication to citizens around the United States. The problem is nobody wanted to make it mandatory, right? The usability people inside big companies, like Gmail and Amazon, said, we'll have it be voluntary for the smart and enlightened people like all you who are here and realize you need this, but it won't be mandatory. So we then watched the uptake rates, how many people signed up for two-factor authentication, and it's very low. It's single-digit percents at most major web platforms. This is when you turn it on, it sends a code to your phone, you type in the code from your phone into the browser, and you authenticate right there with that plus your password. Very few people use it. So I've been disappointed to see that people, even when presented with a more secure, free way, protect themselves, are still not using it. So we need to find a way to do more, perhaps companies, governments, or just consumers, to push multi-factor authentication.
So let me,
What I heard from a lot of readers when I'm telling them to turn on two-factor authentication because it's a great way to protect your account, is they get nervous about giving up their phone number to these companies. And they're like, I don't want Facebook to know my mobile number. I don't want Google to know my mobile number. And I always told them they were crazy. And then I was recently talking to a company that's building a reputation score for phone numbers, where they're basically the vendor that's used by a lot of companies to do their two-factor authentication. And so they have this great database of big data around numbers that are associated with real accounts, and they can say which numbers are scammy and which ones aren't. So I think this is something that really concerns people, is that when they want to give up, when they're asked to give up data to have a more secure account, then how is that data going to be used in secondary ways that they don't expect? So it's just this constant kind of, I want to be secure, I still want to be private, and how do you navigate that?
I think for me, one of the things with two-factor authentication is obviously great. It's something that we all need to be thinking about. But when you're talking about some of the hackers out there that are doing some interesting things with the malware on phones, things that can actually collect that second-factor authentication via SMS and send it back to them and then delete the SMS from your phone. I think we need to start thinking about different methods of second-factor authentication. I'm pretty uncomfortable with giving out the phone number to some of these companies for second-factor authentication because when you do that, obviously they get the banks calling up and they want to know if you want another loan or whatever. But thinking about, I look at my device as something very useful, but every day I'm looking at it with more and more suspicion because I know more and more about the ways that it can be attacked by different people. Just by, sometimes maybe I'm doing something quickly and something pops up and then I get an option that I can immediately hit, and then I just go and accept a security certificate that's going to go in perpetuity until I do a factory reset. So there's things we need to be thinking about these devices, and we need to go beyond just some of the simple, okay, we're going to send SMS two-factor authentication, and we need to go into some other types, like I think Symantec I don't know if McAfee also has two-factor authentication.
Absolutely. And what I'm hearing throughout is beyond privacy and security, I'm hearing usability over and over again. It's about usability. And the analogy I always go back to is, Myers, so it's a drinking analogy. When I was in law school, there were two bars. One was O'Malley's on one side of the street, and one was O-Bar on the other. And O-Bar, you had to plan. And you had to wear a lot of small clothing if you were a female. And you had to try to get on the list and have a friend. And then there was a velvet rope with a guy to check the list. So it was 25-factor authentication to get into O-Bar. And the cocktails were $25 a piece. But it was the place to be. O'Malley's, any schmuck like me could drink a beer out of a plastic cup for $2. The price you had to pay was some drunk guy with slime all over you and not be able to pay for your $2 drink. Which often happened to a bar too, by the way, but that's a different panel for another night. And what I think about when I think about that analogy is the effort and the inconvenience that we go through for things that are valuable and to really authenticate so that you're in a secure enclave. And I think about the time that especially our young people spend watching YouTube videos, playing video games, and hoping to get to that next level. And they'll play through levels 4 over and over again to get to level 5. That's a form of authentication in the form of play. So I'm wondering if there isn't more meaningful kind of adopting the Velcro strategy for things like banking and adopting the play strategy for things like Angry Birds to make sure it really is authenticated and not spewing malware into your devices. I obviously don't have the answers, and now you know why I'm legal and not in design. But that's what I'm hearing from you guys. There's a lot of design brokenness as well as security. I think everyone can agree these are important things to have, but how do we get there?
Yeah, I have to say though, I would almost feel better if the vast majority of consumers were not taking the steps they should for the reasons that the two of you say. I don't think that's true at all. I believe they're not doing it because the extra 5 seconds is just too much work. It's just too hard. It's just too easy to hand my tablet or my phone to my, 4-year-old when she's screaming at the top of her lungs and not worry about exactly what it is that she's doing, that she's ringing up the, charges and all that stuff. So I would actually take a little bit of comfort if there were concerns around different authentication forms and then figure out how to get around those concerns. I think the questions are not even being asked, the thought process is not even being followed for, the average Mr. and Mrs. out
So
there.
we haven't even got there yet.
I really do.
I contend that that thought process isn't even being considered at some of the higher executive
I
levels.
totally agree.
I know some companies here in Silicon Valley that do, and just moving for a second off of mobile onto PC technology, they actually make technology for whole disk encryption. Their executives don't use it because it's going to require them to put in another password. Yet the same executives will get on a plane, fly to China, go through customs, sir, turn on the computer for me, okay, fine. I'll take that just for a second, and then take it to a background. We all know what's going on there, right? APT or something of that sort. And then they bring the computer back, and I know people that are in the MIS department are saying, we've been telling them that they need to use the security, and they complain about it because they're a VP level. They get away with it. The MIS people are afraid to actually tell the senior executives, well, I'm being paid to keep our business safe. And so it's something that's the executive level. It's also something at the consumer levels people aren't talking about it, and I think in part because they don't know about it. When you take a look at issues like 2012 census data, there's about 196 million people over the age of 18 in the country using 2012 data. And if you look at that demographic, there's only about 37% that actually have finished a higher level education that will help people to do higher levels of analysis and make better decisions. Most of the time, not all the time. We have a problem with critical thinking in this country, but
It's always a carbon-based unit.
But the point being is, and then if you take a look at Bureau of Labor Statistics data for the same year, you'll find that only about 1.13% of the population identify themselves as working in computers or math, and only 0.2%, about 620,000 people, say that they're working in some kind of information security profession. So if you have that many people, that few amount of people, in a country where we're over 314 million now, that know something, or even a little something about security, then how can we expect the common person to actually know what the difference is between a good security decision and a bad security decision? And obviously we don't have parents that can help the children.
So it sounds like what we're calling for is leadership in depth as well as security in depth. And I have to agree with you, and certainly, I have a very modern view of a security company. We'll want to build as much of it to be automated as possible, but I certainly don't think it ends there. I think there needs to be more of these kind of conversations going on for sure. So I think that's a really important point to play. I want to ask, and I think we've started to address this question, is if there's a gap between the effort that enterprises are putting forth to protect users against mobile privacy and security issues and the effort consumers are putting forth. And I think we've started to tap into this vein of what is the balance of rights and responsibilities, and how do we kind of engage in it and get all the harmonized units, the consumers as well as the leaders and providers. So I'm getting most nods from you, so I'll on you first.
So, when I was in the White House, we spent much more time focusing on what big companies were doing to secure themselves than consumers. I'm not sure that was the right thing, but it was because people were worried about attacks on power grid banks or NASDAQ first and foremost. Secondarily, worried about what all the citizens were doing. Now, in the cases of businesses, they have a lot more to lose, right? They have very valuable intellectual property, like stealth fighter plane plans, right? That matters to national security, and the government wants to step in and make sure that's secure. They also, as you know, are not generally legally protected for losses from their bank accounts. Hackers go into business bank accounts and siphon away money. It's kind of a fight between the bank and whoever got who has to pay the bill. Thirdly, there's that national security base I mentioned. The government thinks protecting the power grid and NASDAQ is just more important than the country than protecting every consumer, for better or for worse. And so I've seen the businesses step up quite a bit, either because their CFO tells them to, because of the dollar risk, or because the government briefed on them to do it. And when the Defense Department comes knocking on your door asking for you to step up your game, it's hard to say no. That said, there was a lot of interest in awareness building, which is very interesting. I actually thought the government might say that's impossible. Just give up. We can't get consumers, the carbon-based platforms, to actually defend themselves. Let's focus on the businesses or the botnet detectors or ISPs. But in fact, no. There is, as you know, annual funding for Cyber Awareness Month. There's more and more speeches government leaders are giving around the country to get consumers interested. Workshops all around different major cities to talk about cybersecurity for consumers. So I've seen more and more interest there as well. But bottom line, I think that the businesses are aware. They're issuing mobile devices to their employees that are very well locked down. But the end users cannot install whatever apps they want. They must have one two-factor authentication set up. Sometimes it's mobile device management to track it. So they can quickly intercede infection and quarantine. And you see that happening almost never with consumer devices. Pretty much unprotected. There's no perimeter defense out there. Somebody looking out for you. Pretty much on your own.
And with BYOD, they're coming in and out of our enterprises as well. So I saw you nodding down there too, Kashmir. What's the balance? How do we get this?
When I'm looking at what privacy advocates are doing, their big emphasis is on getting companies to make different decisions. So if you can get Google or Facebook to turn on SSL by default, that is more helpful than like trying to inform people about where they're going to go or what they should do. So in terms of what I cover, really the big emphasis is on trying to get companies to make different decisions and choose privacy and security measures by default, so consumers can trust the product or the service that they're using.
Let's pick another topic here. So if you were, this is a good one, I like this one. If you were able to provide one piece of expert advice to parents, let's talk about the kids and the next generation. about protecting their own identity from mobile privacy and security threats. What is the most impactful, and you can pick age ranges if you wish, because there's different things that you do, as we were discussing. I have a 12-year-old going at 45.
Well, here's one that applies, I think, to all kids, which is never let them give their actual name, their actual age, their actual address. There is no reason in the world that they need to give any of that real information to any app to take advantage of it. And quite frankly, there's no benefit to it. So really, so as a mom that I like to consider I'm fairly responsible, as my kids are now halfway across the country, completely across the country. I like to just be, constantly watching what they're doing, what they're downloading, what they're watching. All of those things are very good. However, I truly believe that, we're kind of a lost generation. I think our real hope in consumer awareness and consumer really controlling their own security lies in what we call the digital native. So that generation that never knew a world without mobile devices, ubiquity in mobile devices. So for them, teaching them, look, even if you're gonna do what, quite frankly, my daughter did a long time ago because she was too young and too stupid, and I guess I was young and stupid too. She actually went into one of those websites where she had to put in my email address so that I would give the permission. She put in her email address, and not with any malicious intent, but that's what she thought she's supposed to do. So even if they're going to do all those things wrong, if you can just teach them, whether they're 4 or 14 or whatever age, look, just make it up. You have nothing to lose. I think that's the one thing I always tell my friends and their kids. When's your birthday? And then they tell me the real birthday. I'm like, no, that's not your birthday. Don't say that. And I, every time I see one of my friends come on Facebook and say, happy birthday to Junior, 14 years ago today, you changed my life, I cringe. It's like, just don't put that out there. There's no benefit to that. So, that's mine. I like it.
I like a lot of your points, and frankly, for one of my Twitter accounts, I follow it. I don't have my real name out there. I think that we've got to a point to where we don't spend enough time trying to tell some of the children that are coming up. I know that I try to do this for my nephew. I send stuff over to him or to his mom because they don't want to listen to the uncle talking about some of these things. But that you have to understand that what you put out there, it's going to stay out there. And so what are the implications going to be? You're talking about some of the teens that are going out there and doing it. Well, they've actually had university admissions people say that they've turned down applicants because of certain things they put out on social media. So you definitely want to have that kind of digital firewall, so to speak, between your real persona and your online persona. That's probably one of the key things that I would communicate to parents, because any kind of mistakes or faux pas that you make, as long as you're behind that fake persona, you kind of get it over. But if you've got your real face and photo and your email or something attached to your name, it's a lot harder to wipe out. There's an ad that I put up for a cat being adopted back in 2004. It's still up there. I can't get rid of it.
You don't have it forever. Any ideas, you guys, for best tips for families and parents and kids?
Well, one of the things I love as a person who writes about privacy, and people have been saying for a long time that privacy is dead, or that people don't care about privacy. So I've been kind of excited about the rise of Snapchat, even though it's not a very secure platform. I wouldn't hold it up as a great example of data deletion, because there are so many ways of working around it. But it does show that kids are looking for ways of protecting their privacy and having these kind of images that they send to people that are immediately deleted so that they're not leaving a trail behind. So I've just found that to be like an interesting counterpoint for people who say that people don't care about privacy. And then what I'm starting to think about around privacy issues around mobile is this kind of Internet of Things and using the phone as a tracking device outside of just what you're doing on your phone. But as it's being used to track people as they're like going we're in the very early stages of that, and so I'm curious as to how that's going to evolve. It's kind of this desire to have real world analytics and the way that we currently have web analytics. You can see who's coming in, and then start building profiles on top of that. So now I'm starting to tell people, well, make sure when you're moving around with your phone, if you care about these issues, that you turn off Bluetooth, you turn off Wi-Fi, because otherwise, you're projecting a signal that can be tracked.
Aren't they also tracking people that walk right by the store as well?
Yeah.
So you don't have to go in.
Right, you don't have to go in, because they want to know, well, if we change our storefront, how many people who are passing by on the sidewalk actually come into the store? And it's not you, it's not saying Kashmir Hill walked by Phil's and then went in and, got the crazy ginger iced coffee thing that they have. It's just, the MAC address for my phone, and so it's not personalized, but I can imagine a world in which we start associating identity with those profiles.
We need to there. You've got all guys.
Yeah, two little baby girls, they're too small to understand what they're doing. Give them a week.
Give them a week.
That's right. I have a more general point that I was thinking of, which is just using unsecured Wi-Fi. So I don't know if they're big enough to understand that, how people might get, they're 2 and 4 years old. But,
Pretty smart.
yeah, but we all do this too, right? I think we just use unsecured and open Wi-Fi in airports and coffee shops. Either you've got a bandwidth limit, you don't want to pay the bill, so you turn on Wi-Fi to download your apps and your updates, and you don't want to wait. Or you're just using it because it's free and it's faster when you're waiting for your plane. It's a really bad decision. I mean, open unsecured Wi-Fi, you are extremely vulnerable to what's called man-in-the-middle attacks, right? It's someone who's just sniffing the traffic going back and forth, and it's really not that hard to do. And so don't do that. Don't do anything important on open unsecured Wi-Fi. Wait till you get home to your secured Wi-Fi.
To your home.
Your home secured Wi-Fi, which is probably secured, and do your important business there.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. And do make sure, it drives me crazy to be in people's homes and see their Wi-Fi completely. And their banking, they think they're being virtuous by coming home to their banking and whatnot, and it's wide open. So do check your settings. I think that's the other part of this. As much as privacy engineering and security by design, when it is built, there is some stuff there. You do need to look and make sure your Bluetooth is turned off. I see like the little light on their glass things. We're going to see more and more data collectors out there. So you have to figure out how do you connect to the collect, right? Figure out, when I've got a child that's got a phone with a camera on it, make sure the geo tags are off so that's not, every photo that they share has that. I will make a pump, this is not a McAfee product, but go to your Snapchat, it's already been compromised, use Wickr, W-I-C-K-R. It is a 256-bit encrypted video message, email, and then you decide how long you want to keep it. It makes me crazy to see really good technology pushed aside by fanboys. So I'm sorry if you're from Snapchat. I hope you do get millions of dollars, but your stuff doesn't work and protect our children. So adults, go use Snapchat. Children, get on Wickr. So the other thing I want to make is to highlight a point that Kashmir said, which I think is really important. We at McAfee have a cyber safety for schools that's built on the NCSA, the Stop and Connect campaign in partnership with the government. And as part of that, last year, so I have 2 daughters. I have a 12-year-old, and as I'm giving away my personal information, and a little one who was a first grader who looked exactly like Maddie, who was shot in Connecticut almost exactly a year ago, last December. And so I personally said, I'm going to get to 27 classrooms and kind of honor, those kids and those teachers. And so in doing so, talked to thousands of parents and kids last year, and I am filled with hope. They change platforms, they use made-up languages, they switch accounts all the time. They want privacy, they want integrity, they want to curate a brand. What they don't have is judgment, experience, life, and they don't care about the stuff you care about. So they don't care about their personal, physical integrity because they just assume mom and dad will always be there. They don't care about your banking credentials or a credit card, but they care about who their crush is, and they care that nobody knows that they poop. I go to high schools all the time and say, who pooped? And they're like, oh my God, how did you know? That's their secret. They don't have bodily functions when you're a teenager. That's hugely embarrassing. That's health data to them. And And I always say to them, that horror that you felt, that you thought I was going to call on you and ask if you did, is the same horror we feel when we see you typing in pictures of, we're going to rave tonight in the city, or OMG. There's a young lady called Vodka Jane, I think her name was, or Vodka Joe or something. And she was a young lady who was a college sophomore, I believe, and she got really, really, really drunk, and she was arrested at a college football game on television. Her parents are watching her get arrested, and she had a blood alcohol test at like 0.365, like one more sip of vodka, and she basically would have died. And so she started, of course, as one does, tweeting from her jail cell. And she was, and her tweet handle was like Vodka Jane or something. And so I saw an interview of this girl, and she was absolutely devastated. Everyone knew who she was. She was getting endorsements from like bikini modeling endorsements and vodka companies and all sorts of stuff, and crazy solicitation from disgusting old men. And it really ruined her life. These are the things that our kids don't have. And I will argue, back to your executives, sometimes I think that they think they're impervious as well. So I think it's always good to tell stories that illuminate the issues. So if you're in your development meetings and you're talking to your VCs about why do we care about security and privacy, it's not an extra expense. I think that's the story I will tell, is it really is intermarried to our integrity of data. I think I promised a soapbox as well as the moderation. I'm not very moderate, so. I did want to talk to, how much time do we have left? Where's my timekeeper? 15 minutes? Okay, good. So I wanted to get to this one, which is kind of a good one, which is, what is the most shocking security issue or privacy violation you've seen play out in the real world with consumers or a mobile hack? So I'll go down the line. Tell us, bring out your dead.
I'll go first. So it didn't happen to me, but something that happened on my watch. So when I was in the White House, there were these groups called Anonymous, right? MolSec, Anti-Sec, right? I'm not in the
You're bringing back memories. Terrible, terrible, traumatic.
Plug your ears.
This would be like the therapy Dr. Phil part. It's okay to cry. I'm a little bit on the way.
And so these groups, as you probably know, these are kind of transnational groups with a cause. And they're trying to get attention for their cause. And so they usually use hacking to get attention for what point they're trying to make. The 99%, or we talking about Wall Street, or they're upset with the government tomorrow. They'll go hack it and cause trouble. So one thing that happened when we were watching was they hacked into police department databases. And they just sent spear phishing emails. You guys know what a spear phishing email is. It's an email that looks like it's from someone you trust to you, but it's really fake. And you click on an attachment that's embedded because I think it's from Michelle, telling you what the talking points are for today. And once I click on that, I get infected with the virus. On my computer, get into my network and steal my stuff. So what happened here is they stole Boston, Texas, and Arizona policemen's home addresses. And they put them all on the internet because they were upset at those police departments for stopping their protests in the park. And so, unfortunately, what happened, that's all the hackers did, but what happened next is other bad guys who had a beef with those policemen for other reasons could threaten their wives and kids, and call in bomb threats at their houses, and throw eggs at their house, and start really jeopardizing their family's welfare. And so they backed up, they figured out how did this happen. And some of these happened from spear phishing emails that people opened up their mobile phone. You get an email, click on a link. On your mobile, you're not getting a lot of information about that link. You're not getting a mouse over hover thing that tells you it's a fake address. Clicking on it, and then you're and it just takes one of these people who have a police email address to basically open the floodgates and let it out. So this is something that really scared me. A mobile phone that a policeman is carrying around, get instructions from headquarters, clicking on the wrong thing, and all of a sudden all the policemen's home addresses are now available for bad guys to go after. That's my life.
Well, that's a horrible horror story. Maggie.
Yeah, no, and just to follow on what you just said, what I found incredibly offensive about Anonymous, MolSec, and I'm sure there are others, that they call themselves activists, and they have this notion that we're out here doing the greater good, whereas that is not at all what they're doing. There was nothing, sacred or honorable about what they were doing. They were compromising real information, real lives, and they were really wrecking havoc, and they still are. And I used to work for a big consumer brand, so it was just absurd the things they were doing, all in the name of, hey, we're here for the greater good, which was just BS. The one that really jumps out at me because it was really playing out and it was something that was just so real to everybody. And of course, now I'm not going to be able to remember the word's name, but the guy who basically, like, somebody through social engineering because he didn't have the two-factor authentication. What was his name? Yes, that's it. I was going to say Han, and I knew that wasn't right. You know, where everything, like, all of his information was just completely wiped clean. It was literally, like, what he was describing was exactly what could happen to any and every one of us. And I remember reading article after article, and I was like, holy crap.
And you can have journalists able to tell stories with integrity and safety, and we really have lost something important in our democracy. So I think that's another really great thing. We will end on a high before everyone is like really like depressed. There's a lot of cheese, and I remind you that there's a lot of.
You know, that story, I actually, just this week, went back and reread his article about that and then about how he got his life back. And I think that even if, you know, people in the audience have read those articles, it's nice to actually go back and refresh yourselves on what happened, because I went and did that and I went, you know what, I need to go and change a couple of other things. Anyway, because I speak with a lot of different security vendors in my line of work, one of the things that was interesting and really disturbing for me is on these devices that we all carry. I had them in the pool when I do.
I was told I was on the pool when I was 12-year-old.
They have things called mobile configuration profiles. Everybody know what these are, more or less? Yeah. There are services out there that say you can use our service. All you have to do is download the mobile configuration profile onto your smartphone. And there are malicious mobile configuration profiles out there that after it's installed on your phone, it can actually tell the person on the other side of the world on his dashboard or her dashboard that you just got into a certain app and what your login credentials were. I had a guy at an Israeli security company tell me he was working on this and showed me how the whole thing worked. And he had me put something that was appropriately labeled malicious mobile configuration profile on my iPhone. And they said, okay, now go into your banking app and don't put in the right credentials, but just type in something. And I did that, and instantaneously it was right there. So he's since done a little more research in this area and found out that there are a lot of apps that aren't coded as well as they could be, and it leaves them susceptible to HTTP request hijacking. And so there's a way that you can use the malicious mobile configuration profiles along with the hijacking of data going out to some of these applications that you have on your phone, and start to do some interesting things. I think that's the key thing, mobile configuration profiles. It always makes me suspicious because I have one also for work, so I shot that over to him and said, you take a look at this because, frankly, I don't trust the guys in my MIS department.
Always good to know.
And it's not because they're nosy, it's just, do they know what it is that they're doing here? And are they only getting the information off of my device that they need? So.
All right, so you can bring us up or you can bring us down, whatever you want to do.
I have so many stories, it's like hard to choose, but I'm going to stay with my theme of company defaults. And this was from a few years ago, but it was around the company Fitbit, which makes those little things that track your movement, your steps, and keep your friends as to like who's burning those calories per day. And I think Fitbits are very cool. But they had an option on their website for if their Fitbit wasn't capturing certain activities, like you went swimming or you rode a horse or something, and you wanted to track those activities and the calories burned. you could put it in, and it had some default options, and then you could create your own. And they made this public by default because they wanted to create this network. You can see what other people are doing. It was this kind of social imperative. And so some people started putting in an obvious activity that a lot of us do a lot, where you burn a lot of calories. They're putting your sexual activity in, and you could say whether it was vigorous, or it was moderate, or it was like lazy sex. And so people started putting this in and saying, I did the, vigorous activity for half an hour, moderate for an hour and a half. And it was all public by default. And so all these users.
For a long time, an hour and a half.
And then finally somebody pointed out to Fitbit that they had all these people who had public sexual profiles, and then Fitbit, apologized profusely. They felt horrible. They took it private, and then they changed it so that your activities were only public if you opted to have it public rather than have it by default. So I just think it's really important for companies to think through what they're exposing their users to.
It is funny because it's, it goes back to the kind of the beginning of this, which is, one man's feature is another man's huge bug. That, for me would be kind of a neither or a neutral, but that's a private conversation. But it's funny because these sensitivities are out there, and so when you're coding, I would urge flexibility. I think that's the thing, is I think too much rigidity is a massive problem. And if you're going to do something like allowing someone to have a free form of anything that goes public, have you heard of Rule 34? There's a couple of chuckles, what I'm talking about. So Rule 34 is the internet rule that anything can be sexualized on the internet. So Mickey Mouse has a porn site. So if you leave free text, there's going to be bad stuff in there, whether it's of that nature or a violent nature or a bullying nature. So when you're coding, understand that that is a risk factor. Whether or not it says Social Security, name, geography, open text equals potentially regulated, tricky data. So when you are designing your app, I do urge you to look at that as assume it's regulated data when you're coding in something like that. So Ryan is standing here with the mic. Does this mean we have time for questions?
Yeah, I wanted to see if anyone from the audience, if they had any questions.
Oh, yay! You guys get A pluses.
Since you're closest. Just say your name and where you're from and what your question is.
My name is Kiran Shah. I'm a consultant in embedded systems. Earlier, the mention was made that apps just keep on asking for data and we just give them. Why can't Apple and Android, or Amazon certify the apps for achieving a certain privacy standard before they find a space on the App Store shelf? At least, I know hundreds of other people put out apps, but if the major entities would achieve that standard or enforce that standard, maybe people will say, okay, we'll just buy from that store and not from any other store.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. It's such a valid question. It's one that's been it's a back and forth between, what is the platform responsibility versus the developer, the app developer's responsibility. And you're not going to like this answer at all, but having been part of both the big brother type of organization as well as just the smaller guys, it's a constant juggle as to the more control you exert, and I think Apple and Google have come a long way. And really the reason that all of these apps have to actually tell you what they want is because of Apple and Android. It's not that they just woke up one day and thought it would be such a great idea to actually tell you what it is that they're collecting. But the more control you exert, the more responsibility you have. And so you can then see the economics and the incentives of every organization shift a little bit, which is, if I'm going to come and tell you exactly what to do and how to do it, well, suddenly, if you do something good, bad, or different, I'm responsible. And it's not a good situation for an organization.
But these big entities have social responsibility.
Absolutely they do, but that's not what drives their stock price, and I don't care how evil or not evil they think they might be. Again, apologies to whoever thinks they're implicated, but at the end of the day, they have responsibility to their owners, and that's what drives them. I'm going to get Morgan on my way out the parking lot, right?
I'm going to pop the cork on something that I wasn't even going to talk about.
Pop the cork, Jarad. Let's go.
Let's do it.
But I think that this is part of the problem that we have in the United States. There is a reason for government, right? My wife is a European citizen. They have basic privacy standards. What have we got here? Bupkis. And it's, you know, I know that there's probably a handful of people here that want to take government and starve it until it's small enough to take it in the bathroom and drown it. But there's a reason we have government, and it's to help with these kinds of issues, because frankly, you can't leave these kinds of moral and ethical decisions in the hands of people that have fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders and to make money. There has to be something done to raise the boat of everybody sitting here. And I'm here to tell you that if we can't do it, if we can't get to some form of self-regulation in the mobile telecom industry, then it will get to a point where government is going to step in and they're going to start taking over infrastructure. And I'll tell you, I'm only repeating something that one of your vice presidents said at the Information Security Risk Management Conference in Las Vegas this month, and I agree with him 100%.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting thing, because the other thing that happens, and so, you know, in fairness of you know, we're sitting, you know, right in the heart of it all here, of social networks and the big networks and whatnot, and I think all of us in big IT have been urging for a federal privacy law for over a decade now. We've been in DC because it actually helps government. You know, as much as you don't want to be sat on with regulations that don't matter, it helps a lot to have the basic rules of the road and the requirement. I would differ with some of the details and some of the ways the Europeans are going about it, but I think the overall premise of it is healthy for business, and we certainly endorse a federal bill that would smooth out, you know, instead of having to analyze 46 separate states and local principalities, rules and regulations. So I agree with you. I think there is a place for government in this. It shouldn't stymie technological development, but it certainly can play a hallmark of it.
Yeah, but let's also be very clear that having a broad law, and again, it's very different. You know, in Europe, it's a fundamental human right, and in the U.S., kind of, we love our freedoms, right? So I think there is a lot more ingrained in the differences between the U.S. and the EU, and we just can't kind of capture somebody else's model and consider it done. But I think it's very important to also point out that even though if we have something that is kind of consistent and uniformly, you know, just avoid those probably 4,700 by this point, you know, crazy state laws, that doesn't necessarily solve the problem, right? It's not necessarily going to answer your question, which is, why doesn't the platform take more control? Because I can guarantee you it's going to be another 6 decades before somebody comes up with something that's actually going to really, truly answer all of those questions. And the second they do it, as you know, 10 minutes later, the technology will change on. So I think it's a lot more complicated than just, let's find a law and let's pass it.
Absolutely, absolutely. So
I think we're going to move on to another question, unless everybody wants to talk about this topic, which is totally fine with me.
And then we've got another one in the back when you're done here. So we'll give quick answers.
Yeah, this is a very good question, which is, we're balancing the trade-off between security and privacy, right? But I work in banking, and everything's going electronic. We're moving now from passwords to trying to get authentication of who is behind not the application, but all the devices, right? And we're soon going to move into the Internet of Things, portability, and localization, and very private information. So how do we deal? I think part of the problem is that security becomes complex for the user, right? And everybody's talking now about, can we match biometrics with the devices? Can we do, joint keys? Because in the end, we will have to come up with a solution that is transparent for the user. And we cannot rely on the users to be safe in their relation, but we will integrate even farther and farther. My question is, what do you see the trend, and what is going to be the authentication techniques that we'll have to use? Because we will not rely on the users. It will have to be provided for them.
So I'll dive into like the not near trend, but this is something we think about every single day at McAfee. I think there is, in the Internet of Things in particular, and there's a brilliant book, it's not a McAfee book, it's called Trillions, and it's by my friend Mickey McManus, and it's a wonderful, wonderful book, and actually you can talk to people who are non-technical people about it, and it talks about the organic model. Today we have about 1 billion nodes of information capable devices in the world today. By 2020 we'll have about 1 trillion. We're on a trajectory for about 1 trillion. And if you stop and think about, when we hear these numbers in government all the time, if you think about in terms of seconds, right? 1 billion seconds ago was 30 years ago. I had like feathered hair and leg warmers on, and Farrah Fawcett was like the it girl. 1 trillion seconds ago was 30,000 years ago. We were painting on cave walls. So the quanta of time span and the quanta of data that will need to be authenticated by 2020 horizon will be in the trillions. And so what we need to do is look at things more like the genetic and biosystems and the way that biosystems and immune systems protect themselves. So I think that's where we're going. And I urge you to read the book. I think it's an excellent book. It's not the only book with that kind of positive theory, but I'll throw it out for other strange and goofy ideas.
I think we're already seeing biometrics, right? New iPhone uses fingerprint. And so I think there'll be more attempts to do that. I've heard things about like the way that you type, keeping those kinds of metrics. So yeah, we can tell it's you on the keyboard because that's the way you type. The way you walk and the way your phone kind of just moves in your pocket when you're walking. Certainly a lot of people are thinking about it. But again, as I said earlier, there's a privacy trade-off, right? So you're giving up your fingerprint. You're giving up the way you type, the way you walk. And those are things that can be used in other ways to identify you. So that's the problem or the scary part of biometrics is that security.
I heard about a plan to have like your butt print as a key for your car, and I thought, wow, Spanx will like double as encryption. There's a whole lot of awesome out there on the horizon.
We keep you from like gaining too much weight when your car won't turn on.
Exactly. You have exactly the same. There's merits in this plan. This gentleman is very excited. I thought this is the best awesome question ever. No pressure.
To you next.
Hi, I'm Paul Walsh, CEO of Medicert, Internet Security Company. I'm so pleased we moved it away from talking about putting passwords on mobile phones to a debate about things that people are passionate about mostly. First of all, I'd like to say that the fact that the privacy legislation in the EU being more advanced than the US has got nothing to do with the fact that we like freedom less than Americans, so that's a bit of a weird statement. So my question is this, friend or foe for Edward Snowden?
Hey, I'm a journalist, it's awesome. There's so many documents to report on now. I do tend to call him a whistleblower as opposed to a leaker.
Friend or foe? I look at that in, wow, that's kind of tough because take a look at some of the other countries, Russia, China, heck, look at Chile. Years and years after Pinochet was gone, they still had all of the mobile telecom traffic going through the secret police in that country. So I guess my point is that countries, if they have the ability to get at certain types of data, they're going to do it, right? This is something that's been going on for ever since we've had civilization, and you're trying to get an advantage over someone else. How deep the NSA was getting into things, well, friend or foe? I'm so sitting on the fence about it.
You can pass if you'd like.
What's that?
You can pass if you'd like.
We're all here to talk about privacy on the stage. Tom, give us your opinion regarding
He's a
the
pro.
issue of these documents.
He's a friendly.
Maybe he'll tell you about the party.
I honestly, there are days where I think he's a douchebag, and I only think, and part of your question implies that we know the answer. The reality is that we don't really know the answer yet. I think there's a lot more to come. And on top of that, he's only a friend or a foe if anything changes because of what he did. I truly don't believe that anything will change. There will be media stories. There might be, changes around the margins. Maybe Angela Merkel is somewhat protected now. But in the big picture, I really don't see what he did as changing anything.
Internet companies are already making security changes based on knowing what the NSA has access to. But I don't know that we're going to see the law.
I mean, to me, that's just embarrassment on all of us, right? We can't say we can't point fingers. It's really all of us and everybody who's not in there.
But I mean, that's it. I mean, the NSA, they fulfilled their mandate. This is what they're supposed to do. And every other country in the world has some organization doing that.
It's government.
That's right, that's right.
He's a CEO now. He's with
Exactly,
us.
now we're going to start. I don't have a clear answer either, but I'll tell you how I think about it. And on what you said, it depends on whether we have found some illegal activity, right, that needs to be caught, or whether the citizens are basically telling the legislators here that the laws they voted for don't reflect their interests. And this is a faster way to change than just voting all up the next time we come up. But I think it's too early to tell whether that's happened, right? Is it clear that the government has broken the laws of the land, in the activities that have been revealed? I don't think that's totally clear yet, right? Is it clear that the legislators have voted for laws that govern the legal activities that did not reflect the will of the people in such a way that they need to complain vocally and have things change now? So I don't think we know the answers to that yet. I mean, certainly Snowden had an oath to protect classified information, follow certain laws that cover that, which he did not do, right? So that's not good, right? We're a nation of laws, and so we should probably come and face some kind of investigation on that, right? But that hasn't happened. So I don't think we really know the answer. I think an easier question would be Bradley Manning, right? The prior insider threat from the military who actually had a trial. He had a trial that found him guilty on most counts, not guilty of treason count. And we now have a better sense of what has been changed. So I think there's been more time there to get the answer.
I'll give you the purely commercial answer, which is it really sucked to us as an American company selling security solutions. It sucked our credibility overseas. It sucked people's faith that we don't have backdoors built into our encryption protocols, and we do not. That's the thing I think is friend or foe. I'm a lawyer, so I need more proof. Would it have been better had I seen proof that he tried to escalate his concerns? Would it have been better if we kind of looked at his life and said, gee, I have a pole dancing girlfriend that's going to cut my credibility off at the knees and stop my real ability of getting this information out in a credible way? I mean, there's a million questions in my mind of kind of what happened, but I can only kind of, so I'm very schizophrenic in my friend or frenemy, but commercially it hurt us and it hurt us badly as a nation, not just as a company.
All right, so we're gonna cut two questions into one because I definitely want to get back to you because you're so excited. So just pick who you want to answer it, and then we'll move on from there. Who you want to answer?
Come from on the side.
I would, my question is really to the gentleman who worked in the White House and spent 8 years. And my goal is not to criticize either the government or the private sector. But on the issue of mobility, are you aware of technologies such as 802.11, which allow for monitoring of your movement in the house, in every room, to every room? And two, are you aware of high-definition cameras that could be the domain of wealthy individuals within your neighborhood? Those can track or see what you're entering on your computer or on your mobile phone in any room, in any direction. I'm asking this question to understand. And third thing that I wanted to mention to you, you talked about man-in-the-middle attack, and you said that unencrypted wireless, you'll definitely get hit by man-in-the-middle. Encrypted, it's the same issue. Why does government not do something about man-in-the-middle?
very interesting question, but actually I'd love to ask you, what do you have in mind that the government would do there? Would they mandate use of certain types of encryption protocols?
Actually, my main question is to understand from you, do you know about this? I saw a paper which talked about tracking of individuals within the house using 802.11. I didn't have a chance to read it. But the second one, which is high definition, I saw it as a news item that law enforcement had the ability. Today I saw an article in Guardian that says that private companies and private individuals also have access to all of it. My question is how secure you are when you're using your computer or mobile technologies within your house.
Sure, I got it. So the government's definitely aware, right? As you know, there are very technical parts of the government. NSA, NIST, Department of Commerce, parts of law enforcement, and others that track. The question becomes quickly, should the government regulate or mandate some kind of technical solution? Generally, to take a long debate and shorten it, the government does not want to be in the business of regulating specific technical solutions because then you can't innovate, right? They become outdated faster than they become published. As you know, it takes a year or two or three for the government to put a new rule in place under existing regulatory authority, longer if you need new legislation to create new regulatory authority. So the government typically is not in the business of mandating certain technical things. I think at best, the government will mandate outcomes. A power plant or a nuclear generation plant must be resistant to certain types of risk and meet a certain risk mitigation threshold, but not specify exactly how to do it. So there's a camp that's like you that says, hey, this is a known vulnerability. The government should eliminate this through mandates. And then there's a camp that says, but that will be too slow and will stifle innovation immediately. Everyone will just receive the lowest technical standard that was published and then stop there. And so that debate kind of sloshes back and forth.
All right, we're going to head out after this question. Javin's going to end it on a high note.
So excited.
Well, I thought it was going to be exciting, but I kind of got detracted. I don't think the NSA will watch me in my house, so I'm good enough. Yeah, so it's actually to all of you. Michelle, probably start with you. And you spoke a bit around, you guys are in industry, you're thought leaders, you should be driving this up the food chain if you think it's appropriate. So you have COVID, and there is zero tolerance around what we're doing around kids and their rights and their privacy. Why don't you just push it up year by year as these guys go through this? Make a baseline year, and you guys drive it, because it's the right one. And it applies to adults as well as to kids, but it can be moved along easily. So do you think that's a way that you guys should push it, that you're responsible as both citizens and thought leaders to push that up the food chain?
So I'm not sure, pushing what year by year?
The rights. So to apply what's there for the kids, make it 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, and eventually you get to adults. And there's your privacy. There's your law.
So raising the age on COPPA, I believe.
Oh, raising the age on
top, push it on.
Okay. So COPPA is one of those laws that I think has kept the liquor industry busy with me. It's an advertising law. It is an industry-protected advertising law. It is not a child safety law. 13 does not magically make your child cyber aware. Getting permission for 13-year-olds from parents that don't understand what's going on in the cyber world doesn't make your child any safer. I'm not saying COPPA is not a bad idea. It's a good idea. But it makes me crazy that we've all coded to this 13 age. And, I've got kids around this age. And I hear parents saying, my kids have to wait till they're 13 to get on Facebook. As if suddenly they're mature enough to handle their interaction. So I'll answer the spirit of your question rather than the actual question. I think COPPA is good for what it is. It is good as an advertising law. We don't want people over-targeting tobacco or adult products or other sorts of overly advertised or manipulative marketing to kids. And I think that is a wholesome and good point to COPPA, and that's why it was enacted. So I think that's a good thing. Where I really agree with you is I think we can start mandating certain behaviors. This is a big passion of mine. Every child in America knows how to say stop, drop, and roll. How many kids actually had their pajamas light on fire last year? 0.0002%. And yet we have a whole day with firemen come in and they're all, now let me tell you what, I'd rather have the fire trucks come in than I can visit with the firemen for a day. That's fabulous. What I think would be more fruitful is for technical people to come into schools and have Stop, Think, Connect campaigns. I want every child in America to say, stop, think, connect. Instead, they're still, and I'm not saying, so any fire safety people, don't send me an email. I think it's important to have physical safety and checking, my daughter came home and said, check the batteries and the alarms. But we should have that same rigor for every grade coming up. And we should do things, there's a great program out there called Challenge Day. It's called challengeday.org. And it is a day-long facilitated coaching of how to treat yourself ethically and be an ethical leader and have empathy. I think the more empathy coaching, critical thinking, and decision-making we teach kids, the better off we're going to be as a society. That's a huge soapbox issue, and I think the more you train that type of behavior and reward that type of behavior, will lead to the next step, which is another of my soapbox issues, which is you should not be able to get any sort of electrical engineering degree without a course in security, privacy, and ethics. And right now you can do that, and I find that to be almost criminal. So it's a soapbox. We've got one more hand. Do we want to do that, or do we want to drink?
It's related to what you just said, right?
Okay.
Actually, so.
And that was my soapbox, so it's a little off kilter for Mobley, but.
All right, this is truly the last one.
So on that same topic, when I went to DEF CON earlier this year, in addition to technical ways of hacking, one of the exploits that most hackers use is social engineering, which you guys touched upon earlier. And that basically takes, in addition to whatever computer precautions you have, firewalls and whatnot, basically hackers exploit protocols and general standard habits that people develop in the workplace. Going along the same lines of user education for students, what are some proactive steps that people in companies right now can do to train their employees? Not just simple educational courses, but proactive ways to keep them informed and keep them basically on their guard. Like, what would you recommend in your respective companies? And probably Samir, I think, would be I particularly address this to you because I'm curious as to what the White House did to address social engineering threats.
Yeah, sure. I'll give you some general. I can't talk about White House security.
That would be really bad if we popped up with that one. I would be worried about a little bit.
But let me give you some general things that I hear about. Actually, one great example from our friend Joe Sullivan on Facebook, right? During October at Facebook, Joe and his security team there actually quizzes all the employees by sending them internal secure phishing emails. So he sends fake emails that look like they're from some authority at Facebook that are really not real. And get those people infected and then teach them through embarrassment.
And then we have to sit through boring forms. We do the same thing.
Yeah, I find that really works well.
It's very helpful.
It's just like quizzing when we were in grade school. You got to test people on these things. Another example I saw.
Like everyone always falls for the secure phishing also.
But actually, people have seen that the rates decline as you keep doing the trials because people remember being caught and having to go to,
The wall of sheep.
training tests, and then do their job. Another example that an unnamed cabinet department did is every time you logged in the government, you got a little tip. And maybe try to turn off those tips like in Microsoft Word or something, but for this you couldn't turn them off. And it was a useful tip about how to do proper authentication when you were at home, right? How to avoid certain spear phishing email attack like I mentioned, when and how to patch your computer on time in case you're on the road. And these tips actually made a little bit of a difference. So I think it's the constant daily, weekly testing of your people so they learn to be in battle.
Yeah, think about how excited we are about nutrition tips. There's whole shows and magazines and things devoted. This is, good security and privacy is that same constant rigor. This week it's the cool, make sure the really bad virus has a better GUI on it so that it shows up brighter than the gray ones that are kind of low-lying priorities. It's kind of like it's kale week in the security world. So coming up with different ways, different analogies, have a healthy environment, have a healthy laptop. You can do kitschy things. I dress up in costume and show up on Halloween, dress as a cowgirl. You get creative because we know that people find some of these topics pretty dull, and actually I find them really interesting and fun. So, any other tips or tricks?
I would actually agree with what you're saying about what they were doing on Facebook. It's one of the, I've been in a market research consultancy for over 13 years. We've had a variety of different issues internally. And it's not, we don't just look at ICT, we have people that also look at pharmaceuticals and aerospace and automobiles and stuff like that. So people that don't necessarily know IT. But when certain things come up, there isn't a whole lot of an explanation about it, yet we'll have executives that will take like a day and a half, 2 days, training us on proper procedures for doing certain things inside of the company, but they don't talk about something like, we just had someone help us get hit with crypto locker. Why isn't there, at least a quarter of a day talking about different security incidents that we got hit with? We don't necessarily need to embarrass people, but I think that market research company, we do case studies on these things. What happened? Why did it happen? And what can we do to prevent it? And then after you go through that training and you get certified, then you go and you test people's knowledge. After they've had enough time to sit back and get comfortable, a month later or something, and see who gets hit. And then go and have them go in, need to embarrass them to have them go for a remedial refresher.
I love it. Well, I don't want to keep anyone from, there's like giant wheels of cheese out there, which I thought was really intriguing. And they actually have knives now, so we actually have the tools. We won't make you hack the cheese. But I do want to just give a warm thank you to Samir, Maddie, Jarad, Kashmir. Thank you guys so much for coming out on Monday night. If you have an Android device, I don't know where my colleagues are, are they right up there? They will hand you some free security software for Android.
And they're also in charge of the drink tickets, so.
Oh, and they got drink tickets as well, so you do see them. If you have iProducts coming soon to a McAfee near you.
Thank you guys, thank you panel, thank you for coming. Thank you for your interesting questions.